For 10 years, Mara Hayes dressed like she wanted the world to look past her. Gray cardigans with frayed cuffs. Shoes bought on clearance that squeaked on polished floors. Hair always pulled back too tight, face bare, posture small. At Caldwell and Finch, a towering glass empire of money and power, she was invisible, and that was exactly how she survived. Mara worked in compliance, a department no one visited unless they were in trouble. She filed reports, cross-checked transactions, and noticed patterns others ignored. She spoke softly in meetings, if at all. When colleagues whispered about her clothes or called her the ghost, she pretended not to hear. What no one knew was that 10 years ago, visibility had cost her everything. Back then, Mara had been brilliant and bold, sharp suits, confident smile, fast-tracked promotions. Until her former boss took credit for her work, then quietly destroyed her career when she confronted him. Legal battles followed, settlements, silence. She rebuilt herself piece by piece, choosing obscurity as armor. So she dressed ugly. On purpose. Then the new billionaire boss arrived. Elliot Vance didn't look like the men Mara had learned to fear. He was young for a CEO, early 40s, self-made, known for buying struggling companies and turning them into giants. When he acquired Caldwell and Finch, rumors exploded through the building like wildfire. On his first day, executives lined the hallways in tailored suits. Mara stayed in her cubicle, head down, cardigan buttoned wrong. Until Elliot stopped. He had been walking fast, surrounded by aides, when something on a glass wall caught his eye: numbers. A flowchart sketched in dry erase marker, half erased but elegant. He leaned closer. Who did this? He asked. Silence. Finally, someone pointed. Compliance. Her. Mara looked up, startled, meeting Elliot Vance's eyes for the first time. They weren't dismissive. They were curious. From that day on, he noticed her. Not her clothes. Not her posture. Her mind. He asked for her analysis in meetings. Requested her reports directly. Listened, actually listened, when she spoke. People began to stare. To whisper. Why her? They asked. Mara tried to retreat, but Elliot kept pulling her into the light. One evening, long after the office emptied, he stopped by her desk. You hide, he said gently. Mara's fingers froze over her keyboard. I work. You do more than that, he replied. You see things no one else does. She looked up, guarded. And what do you see, Mr. Vance? He smiled. Potential. And a story. For the first time in 10 years, Mara felt her armor crack. And she was terrified. By Monday morning, the office no longer saw Mara Hayes as invisible. The change wasn't dramatic in the way gossip magazines would have liked. No glittering heels. No designer labels screaming for attention. But everything about her carried intention. Her posture was straighter. Her gaze didn't slide away when people looked at her. And the quiet confidence she wore unsettled everyone more than any luxury outfit ever could. Whispers followed her down the hallway. Is that really her? Since when does she look like that? So that's why the boss. Mara heard none of it. Or rather, she heard it and let it pass through her like wind through open windows. For the first time in a decade, she wasn't bracing herself against the world. Inside Elliot Vance's glass office, time slowed. He had reviewed balance sheets worth billions without a flicker of emotion. He had faced hostile takeovers, courtroom threats, and ruthless competitors with ice in his veins. But when Mara walked past his office, walked, not shuffled, something in his chest shifted painfully. Not desire alone, recognition. She wasn't someone who had changed overnight. She was someone who had finally stopped hiding. Elliot didn't call her in immediately. He knew better. Mara didn't respond well to pressure. Instead, he waited until late afternoon, when the office thinned and the noise faded. She knocked once, firm. You wanted to see me? She asked. Yes, he said, then paused. But if now isn't, it's fine, she replied, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. She stood, hands loosely clasped, unflinching under his gaze. Elliot gestured for her to sit, but she shook her head. I should explain, she said. You don't owe me anything, he answered gently. She exhaled. I know. But I want to. So she told him. Not the polished version. Not the resume-friendly summary. The truth. She spoke of her early career, the meteoric rise, the mentor who praised her brilliance in private and erased her name in public. She described the meeting where she confronted him, believing integrity would protect her. How wrong she had been. He smiled, she said quietly. And told me I was emotional. Unstable. He said no one would believe me. Elliot's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. She told him about the lawsuit that went nowhere, the settlement that came with a silence clause sharp as a blade. About interviews that ended abruptly when her former boss's name came up. About the night she stood in front of her closet and chose clothes that would make her disappear. I didn't want to be noticed anymore, Mara said. I wanted to be safe. Elliot leaned forward, voice low. You survived. I shrank, she corrected. No, he said firmly. You adapted. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Finally, Elliot spoke. Do you know what made me stop at that wall my first day? Mara shook her head. Because it was beautiful, he said. Not flashy, not loud, but precise, honest. It told the truth even half erased. She swallowed. I didn't fall for you because of how you look today, he continued. I fell for you because of how you think. How you see. The word fell hung in the air. Mara didn't step back. I can't be someone's secret, she said calmly. You won't be, Elliot replied without hesitation. Their relationship didn't begin with fireworks. It began with rules. No favoritism. No hidden meetings. No shortcuts. Everything transparent. Everything earned. When they finally went to dinner weeks later, it was after hours, in a quiet restaurant where no one cared who owned what. They talked about books. About childhood failures. About loneliness at the top and the quiet strength required to stay kind. Elliot admitted that his fortune had cost him nearly every genuine relationship he'd ever had. People don't see me, he said. They see what I represent. Mara smiled faintly. I know how that feels. The company, however, was not so gentle. Anonymous complaints appeared. HR requested meetings. Board members raised eyebrows. Elliot answered them all with the same calm authority that had built his empire. Mara Hayes earned her position before I knew her, he said. And she'll keep earning it long after. That silenced most critics. But not all. 3 months later, a resume landed on Mara's desk. The name made her pulse spike. Daniel Crow. Her former boss. The man who had taken credit for her work. The man who had called her unstable. The man who had forced her into a decade-long exile from herself. He was applying for a senior advisory role. Mara stared at the file for a long moment, then closed it. She didn't tremble. She didn't rage. She reviewed every project, every reference, every gap. She noted the inconsistencies, the inflated claims, the subtle pattern she now recognized easily, the same one he'd once used on her. She prepared her report with clinical precision. When she presented her recommendation, Elliot watched her closely, not to intervene, but to witness. Based on performance history, ethical concerns, and cultural fit, Mara concluded, I do not recommend proceeding. Reason? Asked a board member. She met his eyes. He succeeds by standing on others. The decision was unanimous. Later, alone in Elliot's office, she finally allowed herself a breath she'd been holding for 10 years. I thought I'd feel something more, she admitted. Elliot smiled softly. You already won. Months passed. Mara's influence reshaped the company quietly but profoundly. Systems became cleaner. Credit was properly assigned. Young analysts, especially women, found themselves heard instead of talked over. She didn't announce change. She embodied it. At the annual gala, when Elliot took her hand and introduced her not as his partner but as the mind behind our most critical reforms, the applause was thunderous. She wore a dress that night that fit her perfectly, no apology, no armor. As they stood together beneath the lights, a reporter shouted, Ms. Hayes, what made you change? Mara smiled, calm and unafraid. I didn't, she said. I just stopped hiding. Elliot squeezed her hand, not as a billionaire claiming a prize, but as a man standing beside a woman who had always been powerful. She had dressed ugly for 10 years. But only because the world hadn't deserved to see her yet.